Oh boy. Oh, oh dear. If this one movie has taught me anything, maybe sometimes musicals aren't always the best thing.
Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day.
Joker-Folie Deux is directed once again by Todd Phillips and written again by Scott Silver and Todd Phillips. The film stars Joaquin Phoenix, Leigh, Gaga, Brendan Gleeson, Catherine Keener, Zazie, Beetz, Steve Coogan, Harry Lawtey, and Leigh Gill. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, struggling with dual identity, failed comedian Arthur Fleck meets the love of his life, Harley Quinn, while incarcerated at Arkham State Hospital. Joker was a box office success, grossing $1 billion. $1 billion on a Joker movie that had a budget of $55 to $60 million. That's crazy. That's already insane to even think about. And of course, it had some nominations, but more specific, winning 2 Oscars for Best Original Score and Best Actor for Phoenix. Rightfully so. 2 of those things are most deserved of that statue. It was the highest grossing R-rated film of all time until this year when Deadpool and Wolverine came out and has now dethroned it, but it is still sitting comfortably as the second highest grossing R-rated film of all time. Needless to say, it was a big win for Warner Brothers, and audiences saw that that was it. That was all they were going to get, and for that reason, people went and saw it, people enjoyed it, people couldn't get enough of it, but people had thought that, well, it makes sense for what this movie was trying to do, that'd be it. When it was announced that there would be a sequel that would include Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn and would be a jukebox musical, people had mixed feelings on this. Some were excited at the prospect of there being a sequel to the first film. Some people were excited for Lady Gaga to take on the role of Harley Quinn. Some people were excited to see what this jukebox musical could be. And some were confused. I was probably in that camp where I was confused that they would be making a sequel, but I was still intrigued enough to see where this movie could go, possibly. But I was still more or less confused and kind of weirded out by the fact that there was going to be a sequel to Joker. Because I never thought that there would be a sequel. I thought that this was just a one and done thing, but apparently Warner Brothers said otherwise, or in this case, both Warner Brothers, Todd Phillips, and Joaquin Phoenix. When it premiered at the Venice Film Festival, it started to receive mixed to negative reviews that became pretty much a warning sign. It was a definite warning sign to people of what this movie was going to be. Out of that festival, you had people saying that there were some good things about this film, Lady Gaga being one of them, and it kind of going against what most sequels try to do. At the same time, you also had criticisms of the fact that it was a musical. People didn't understand why it was that, when people thought that they just felt unnecessary or that it was mostly a courtroom drama, pretty much. Once it released, and after watching it, for me, you guys, this is possibly one of the most pointless and frustrating sequels I've ever seen as of right now. I'm baffled that this is a sequel to this movie. And it's not even so much of the fact that there can't be, but the fact that how it turned out, how this concept of a jukebox musical, or better yet, have it be mostly a courtroom drama, baffles me. Because at no point did I find myself investing in this film. I tried to, but for the most part, I found myself pretty bored and pretty annoyed by it. Before giving my problems with the movie, here are the positives that I had with it. The performances, they're all well done. Joaquin Phoenix is still terrific as Arthur Fleck. Phoenix keeps the same energy that he brought to the first film, and he is easily the best part of this movie. I seriously believe without him, I feel like this movie pretty much kind of fall apart with regards to your main character. who you follow. And as much as you can criticize maybe the writing, Joaquin Phoenix himself, he still sells it, this idea of this guy who has been mistreated by society, who feels castrated, he feels like he is justifiable in what he did and what he feels, but he is still struggling with his identity as being the Joker. Lady Gaga is good as Harley Quinn. Gaga manages to capture the style and tone of this world, though not in the film that much. She matches well within the film, and that's my biggest probably complaint about it, but we'll say on that in a bit. But Lady Gaga herself, she has now started to prove herself to be a talented actress, and she is continuing to do that. And in this movie, as much as she's not in it that much, I did actually kind of like her. I kind of wish, though, that there was more to it, but I didn't mind her performance in the slightest. I think she does provide a sense of comfort and love, especially to Arthur Fleck in this cruel world and trying to find a relationship with him. And speaking of that relationship, both Phoenix and Gaga are stellar together. They have good rapport with each other that kept the film tolerable. At best, they are the reason why they were keeping me from totally 100% checking out from this movie, because I could easily do that, but they were at the very least still captivating enough to at least watch them act with each other that I was able to go along with it for the most part. Brendan Gleeson is fine as Jackie Sullivan, who is a guard at Arkham State Hospital where Fleck is being held. Gleeson plays Sullivan as a hard ass and an abusive guard towards the inmates. Gleeson, talented actor, has a son at the very least who also follows in his footsteps as an actor, and he himself, Brendan Gleeson, I think is really excellent. I think he is a really good actor, and in this movie he's fine. He's all right. Again, minus the script, I think his acting alone does sell the role of what he is going for. Both Phoenix and Gleeson are good together. They have an abusive relationship that makes it enjoyable to watch their interaction. And when I say enjoyable, I just meant like their back and forth banters as much as it is a abusive as all hell, especially towards Arthur Fleck. You kind of like seeing these two have their conversations. You have Sullivan just again making fun of, but also kind of in a way being nice to Fleck, and then you have Fleck trying to kind of be nice, but you know as the movie goes along what he is trying to do. But for the most part, these two actors were pretty good together. The cinematography is stunning. Once again, cinematographer Lawrence Shear manages to still capture the grounded and gritty look of Gotham City. He also does well at showing Fleck's mind, how his mind works, how it operates, how he sees the world. And even in the musical sequences, I think he does a good job of still capturing the insanity of it all, which I think works well with regards to how this movie is supposed to, I guess, be. Direction-wise, that's one thing, but cinematography-wise, I still think it is a very gorgeous-looking film. The music is intense. Composer Hildur Guðnadóttir continues to keep the same vibe and tone as the first film. The orchestral score shines throughout most of this movie, which is a good thing, because with this being a jukebox musical, I thought that they wouldn't have a score of such with this movie, because usually a musical usually requires the musical sequences being pretty much the most of a movie score. But thankfully, the score that is from the first film, or at the very least the composer of the first film, coming back to do this, I think was good, because if they hadn't, I think this movie would have been dead with regards to its music. But for the most part, I did find myself really liking the orchestral music that was put into this movie. And the production is stellar. Every costume, prop, and set are excellent and are in line with what the first movie had offered. Incredible work all across the board. No matter what I have to say about this movie, the production of it all is amazing. There's a lot of hard work that is put into the costumes, like I said, as well as the sets, especially the musical sequences, done well with regards to how they're supposed to look, how they're supposed to feel, as well as just general areas, I think are done pretty well themselves. But beyond that, this sequel is just frustrating and dull. And that's not how you would want a sequel to be. And of course, this movie takes a lot of risks, and this pretty much proves, at least for me, this proves that this shouldn't have been a follow-up to this movie. I honestly think there shouldn't have been a sequel to begin with. So here are the negatives that I have. The story is a complete mess. Most of the film is a courtroom procedural. That is what most of this movie is. It is a courtroom procedural of going over the events of what happened in the first movie. And of course, the movie takes place 2 years later, and so pretty much it's just now having to catch up with not only the story that they're trying to tell, but they're also trying to retell at the same time. And also, the film doubles down on its messaging, because I, at the very least, respected the messaging and what they were trying to do with the first Joker. But here, it's almost like Todd Phillips, and I've seen a lot of people have said this, and I agree with it. It seems like everyone has been saying that, like, Todd Phillips kind of doubled down on his messaging with regards to what he is trying to say, with regards to the state of the world and how people treat others, especially with mental health issues. And man, the fact that you just kept on doubling down on that messaging hurts this movie so much, because you're just trying so hard to convince people, no, that movie had a reasoning. Anybody that criticized the violence and all that stuff, this is for you. And listen, I understand, but at the same time, when you double down on your messaging so much and hammering it in, it gets to a point where it's just now you're preaching to the choir. You're just now hammering the idea so far in that I can't even stop to think about, well, what is this movie trying to convey that message in a way that isn't a repeat or doubling down? But instead, you just double down on the messaging, and for that, that's very disappointing to see you indulge yourself in having to prove your naysayers wrong when really you could just continue on with what you have. The pacing and runtime, it's too long. Just like the first film, every scene takes a long time to get through. With a runtime of 2 hours and 19 minutes, it shouldn't have been close to 2.5 hours. This should nowhere be on the same wavelength as a 2.5 hour movie. This movie hasn't warranted that length. And for having a movie be a musical, man, I don't need a musical that's this long, man. I really shouldn't, because, and we'll get to the musical part in a bit, but how this movie is paced is just bizarre to me, because sometimes it'll be super slow. It's mostly super slow, but then there's these supposedly fast musical sequences, and then it just goes back to being slow. So I would say that it does have the occasional sped up moments, but even then, those musical sequences, that's something to be said. But the pacing of this movie, how long it is, not worth it. If you ask me, the musical sequences are wasted in this film. Not only is the sequences pointless, but there were too many of them. And it begs the question, why was this a musical? Seriously, why was it? I was sitting next to a buddy of mine. Shout out to Bradley, awesome guy, great friend. We were sitting next to each other, and as we were watching, and as the musical sequences were happening, he sat there and he turned to me, tell me, the whole point of musicals is to progress the plot along. That's the whole point. Usually that's what most musicals do. They progress the plot with regards to character development as well as story. This movie doesn't do neither of those things, and instead relies on just, well, it's a musical. We just wanted to make a musical. But there's no reason, because most of the music in here sounds the same or just not well done. They all just kind of feel like they're mumbling half the time. And maybe that was the point, but let me tell you, the whole point of a musical is not to mumble, it is to provide audiences with an experience that people can get behind. The direction is flashy. Though similar to the first film, I'll give credit where credit is due. It is similar to the first. Director Todd Phillips makes a more flashy and chaotic sequel. It was a risk, but it didn't pay off. How he was trying to make this feel and look like a musical, but still retain kind of the look of the first film, as much as there are aspects where it does look like he respects what he did with the first movie, this movie, I feel like he tries so hard to make it feel as in your face and flashy as it can be. But the problem is for a movie that is trying to double down on its messaging, it shouldn't feel like it should be flashy and whatnot. It should feel subtle. It should feel simple. But instead, he makes it complicated by adding these musical sequences that aren't supposed to be there, or at the very least shouldn't be there at all. The writing is sloppy. Each conversation feels drawn out and doesn't hold any weight to it. A huge letdown compared to what the first movie did with regards to how characters interacted with one another. And in this movie, how characters talk with one another just kind of feels like they're meandering. And then, of course, you have musical sequences and moments where Joker and Harley Quinn interact with one another with regards to those sequences. Flat doesn't feel as raw, or at the very least as natural as it can. It just all kind of feels like it's stage play. It almost kind of feels like it's an amateur stage play at best. Editing feels random. Scenes would go on long, then it would just rush into these musical sequences and just kind of get through them. And then just it goes back to being slow. Making the film feel inconsistent with how it's supposed to be. Yes, I did mention that it is too long and that the pacing is super slow. But then, like I said, there's moments where there are musical sequences that are just brushed by, and then it just goes back to being a long, drawn-out courtroom drama procedural musical. And that's all it is. It's a elongated film that doesn't feel like it is warrant that runtime. And for this to be a musical, this is pretty low effort, if you ask me, with regards to how a musical should be. If you ask me, this sequel was not worth it. But that's just me. Can't speak to anybody. If you like it, more power to you. I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm just speaking to myself when I say that this sequel was just really not worth it in the end. Phillips tries to gamble, and it just completely fumbles the bag. It messes up everything that it tries to do and how it's supposed to present itself in so many ways. This should have just been a one movie thing and only one. I don't think it should have never have gotten a sequel. This is kind of a letdown compared to what the first movie at least offered, and this doesn't do anything new, if you ask me, with regards to what this story is trying to be. So in the end, I kind of walked away thinking, wow, this was vastly, hugely disappointing to see. I am giving Joker-Folie a 4 out of 10. I don't think it's a good movie. I think this falls flat in so many ways, and this is such a huge misfire for Warner Brothers. And the fact that Todd Phillips just kind of just went to them and them only and not talking with James Gunn at DC, as much as this movie is not trying to do fan service, which, by the way, people are saying like that's the whole point of this movie. At the same time, nobody was asking for fan service. Nobody was asking for Batman characters or even Batman himself to show up and start fighting crime. Nobody was asking that. Everyone was just asking, can you just give us a good movie? And in the end, you didn't give that. And so this whole thing about fan service, I think, is just stupid because I was not walking into fan service. I was just walking, can you just give me a good movie? And even though I knew what the reviews were and what people were saying, I was willing to give it a chance. And in the end, I walked away thinking, wow, this movie does nothing to interest me. This is unsatisfying at best. And the fact that he avoided going to DC to James Gunn, I think, is just not a smart move. And now recently it said that he will no longer be doing Joker movies, which that's okay. I think after this movie, Todd Phillips, I don't think anybody's going to be asking for you to come back anytime soon. If you ask me, that's just me alone. And this has now cost Warner Brothers so much money in loss, and it has now still hurt DC's reputation. So now it is up to you, James Gunn. Good luck to you, man, with Superman and all the other movies you got going up, because, man, we're on death's final doors, all right? We're at the nail of the coffin right now with regards to this being dead on arrival. So good luck to you. No pressure, as much as I shouldn't say that, but that's how I'm feeling. So now I will give my review for Saturday night and then soon the Venom movies leading up to Venom: The Last Dance. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.